Final Fantasy, a role-playing game released in 1987 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, dug struggling game company Squaresoft out of financial difficulties and onto making better games. It's also started one of the biggest oxymorons for a game series, adding a number to the end of every Final Fantasy. I never played the original. I was born in 1984, so I missed that one by a wide margin. I have, however, played the Dawn of Souls remake for the Gameboy Advance, and after seeing the original played, for its bugs and glitches in all its glory, I'm glad I played the remake. But at the same time, I'm glad I played it at all, because I can see why it was such a big hit back then.
When you first start up the game, you're greeted with 4 nameless characters. These 4 are your party members, and you give them names and assign them one of 6 different classes. This gives you a ton of freedom from the word go, as you could have any 4 names you desire and have any combination of party members you see fit. This is huge, especially to me, as I can immediately identify with the party. How can I not? They're all me and my best friends, and I know them all fairly well. The Game Boy Advance remake gives a brief cutscene to explain the story soon after. You know, in case you don't have the instruction booklet. To summarize, the 4 crystals of the world have lost their light, and thus everything is horrible. The air is stagnant, the sea is raging, the earth is dying, and fire is, well, being more chaotic than it already is. That's the main quest. Save the world through 4 artifacts. Awesome! We're immediately dropped off in front of a castle town with a small sum of cash to get started. Once we buy equipment, apparently word got out that 4 delinquents, me and my friends, were spotted with some mystical crystals of prophecy. The king then gives us our first quest to give us some direction. Save the princess, stand a heroic fare. Though today that might be an overused quest. Though I think his reward is goofy. Save my daughter, and I'll fix the bridge for you! Shouldn't you have done that by now? You have a kingdom to worry about. Once we leave, we proceed to the north and get into our first random battle with some goblins. And this is where I have to make my first complaint. All the battles are easy and require little thought. Heck, the whole game is easy. Items are cheap, money is plentiful, you can save literally everywhere in the game. This is actually a product of the remake, as the original had some bugs to make things difficult. For example, magic didn't properly use a character's intelligence, meaning spells dealt flat damage for the whole game. Otherwise, combat is the meat of the game and serves as a way for your characters to grow. It operates in a turn-based system and is fairly well done. I think it's an effective mode of gameplay to make you feel like you're getting better as the game progresses. It's also fun to watch. The first 6 times, anyway. The encounter rate is much too high, making progressing slow and tedious. It's also nice to know my intelligence is used in my magic casting. Okay, maybe a single red mage is a bad magic caster. My friends and I do eventually get to the dungeon where the princess is being held, and we're threatened by the man who captured her, Garland. "I will cut you all down to size," he proclaims. Man, that's intimidating. Too bad despite all the hype, he's pretty easy to beat. We rescue the princess, return to the castle where the king makes good on his promise in the span of 6 minutes, to which I ask, how? And the princess gives us a loot for some reason. Then, it's beyond the bridge, and this is a turning point for the story. I think this moment is the biggest highlight of the game, as the 4 heroes aren't sure what lies ahead of them or the expectations to come, but you do know one thing. Their destiny is to save the world, and this moment, right here, is where the real journey begins. That quest you did to rescue the princess of a kingdom? That was just the tutorial. You're on your own from here to explore to your heart's content and progress through the game at your leisure. Although I think many of the quests you do along the way are silly, like beating up a pirate and his crew to take his ship, with his permission no less. It all builds up and leads to you saving the world. Almost everything you do will help you in some way to that eventual goal, and that's the driving point. It's a simple motivation, but it's effective.
Overall, I have to admit that Final Fantasy is a great game. Now, I know not everyone's into turn-based role-playing games, but Final Fantasy did make its mark on history. It dug Squaresoft out of financial troubles for one, and it was one of the few games at the time that had a true closed ending. So, Squaresoft, when they made their sequels, instead pulled the themes from the game, this being medieval fantasy and sci-fi. It also had a side view for combat, allowing everyone to see, well, everything on the battlefield. Unlike its contemporaries at the time, which had an explicitly first-person view. Heck, games in the future would use this side view, and they weren't even from Square. And if this is your first gaming experience, the remake especially, I would say it's a good one. It's got a good story, its gameplay, though easy, is good as well, and the soundtrack's great. So, I'm glad that this wasn't their final fantasy.